morning, First Church. The bold, the courageous, the warm-blooded, and hello to everyone online this morning. I'm Reverend Jennifer Nordstrom. I'm honored to serve you as your senior minister. Our opening words this morning are based on Bell Hooks' book, All About Love. This poem is entitled, If Bell Hooks Wrote 1 Corinthians, and it's by Tess Baumberger. Love is caring, affectionate, and loyal. It recognizes, knows, and respects the other. Love is committed and trusting. Love takes the risk of loving. Love is never hurtful, abusive, or neglectful. It does not coerce or dominate, neither does it spoil or overindulge. Love is ethical, accountable, and responsible. Love does not lie to avoid conflict or manipulate. Love does not lie to trick or deceive. Love is open and honest, but with a positive slant. Love lives with integrity that wills cooperation. Though it is satisfying to love, love is not about getting one's needs met, nor solely about meeting another's needs. True love is made of mutuality. Love is a generous giver, and in giving, it learns to receive. Love places another's interest on the same footing as our own. Love is not so much a feeling as an action, a continuing active choice to nurture another's well-being. There can be no love without justice or equality. Therefore, love requires that we subvert patriarchy, white supremacy, consumerism, ableism, anti-queerness, and all other forms of oppression. Will you please rise in body or spirit for our opening hymn, number 95, the African American Spiritual, There's More Love Somewhere.
Good morning. I'm Reverend Kimberly Tomchek Carlson, and it is my honor to serve you as your Minister of Religious Education. The story I have for you today is called Thank You, Omu, and it's by Oji Mora. On the corner of First and Long Street, at the very top floor, Omu was cooking a thick red stew in a big fat pot for a nice evening meal. She seasoned and stirred it and took just a small taste. What a delicious stew, she said. Tonight's dinner will surely be the best I've ever had. With that, Omu put down her spoon and went to read a book before supper. And as the thick stew simmered on the stove, its scrumptious scent wafted out the window, out the door, down the hall, toward the street, around the block, until someone was at the door. When Omu opened it, she saw a little boy. "Little boy," Omu exclaimed, "what brings you to my home?" "I was playing with my race car down the hall and I smelled the most delicious smell. And I wondered, what is it?" "Oh, it's thick red stew." Stew," he sighed. "That sure sounds yummy." Omu thought for a moment. She was saving her stew for dinner, but she had made quite a bit, and it would not hurt to share. "Would you like some?" The boy nodded. And so Omu spooned out some thick red stew from the big fat pot of her nice evening meal. "Thank you, Omu," the little boy said, and he went on his way. And with that, Omu closed the door and went back to her book, and as she read, her thick red stew, scrumptious scent wafted out the window, out the door, down the hall, toward the street, around the block, until someone was at the door. When Omu opened the door, this time she saw a police officer. "Miss Police Officer," Omu exclaimed, "what brings you to my home?" "Well, I was on my duty on the street when I smelled the most delicious smell," Miss Police Officer replied. "What is it?" "Thick red stew." "Ah, stew," she said, and her mouth watered. "That sure sounds tasty." Omu thought for a minute. There was still enough to share. "Would you like some?" The police officer nodded, and once again Omu spooned up the thick red stew from the big fat pot for her nice evening meal. "Thank you, Omu," the officer said, and went on her way. And so for the second time, Omu closed the door and went back to her book. And sure enough, as she read, her thick red stew, scrumptious scent, wafted out the window, out the door, down the hall, toward the street, around the block, until again, someone was at Omu's door. And this time when she opened it, it was a hot dog vendor. "Mr. Hot Dog Vendor," Omu exclaimed, "what brings you to my home?" "Well, I was selling my hot dogs down the block when I smelled the most delicious smell." "What is it?" "Thick red stew." "Oh, stew." The vendor licked his lips. "That sounds quite delectable." So Omu scooped up some thick red stew from the big fat pot for her nice evening meal. "Thank you, Omu," said the hot dog vendor, and went on his way. Now, throughout the day, people from across the neighborhood kept knocking on Omu's door. She fed a shop owner, a cab driver, a doctor, an actor, a lawyer, a dancer, a baker, an artist, a singer, an athlete, a bus driver, a construction worker, and even the mayor stopped by. And each time they knocked, Omu shared. Soon the sky darkened and the streetlights brightened, and it was finally time for dinner. But when Omu opened her big fat pot of thick red stew for her nice evening meal, it was empty. Omu sniffled a little. "Well, there goes the best dinner I ever had." Sorry and blue, she sat at the table with her empty pot until all this knocking. Who could it be, Omu wondered. And when she opened the door, she saw the little boy, the police officer, the hot dog vendor, the shop owner, the cab driver, the doctor, the actor, the lawyer, the dancer, the baker, while everyone who she had fed that day was at her door. "I'm so sorry, everyone. My thick red stew is all gone. I have nothing left to share." The little boy tugged on Omu's sleeve. Don't worry, Omo. We're not here to ask. We are here to give. The police officer carried in a fresh salad, and the mayor entered with a roast chicken, and the baker brought a collection of sweet goodies. Even the little boy presented Omu with something special in a shiny red envelope. Everyone who had knocked on Omu's door that day squeezed inside her tiny apartment, and together they ate and danced and celebrated. While Omu's big fat pot of red, thick, empty red stew was empty, her heart was full of happiness and love. The dinner was the best she had ever had. The end.
I'd like to invite you into a time of contemplation now, which will be followed by silence, followed by the seated singing of hymn 123, Spirit of Life. So do whatever you need to do to find yourself where you are in your body. Maybe that means you can feel your feet on the floor, or maybe it means you feel your sit bones resting in the pew or the chair beneath you. Maybe it means you feel your spine, one vertebrae stacking up on the next. Maybe it brings you all the way up to the top of your head where you can feel it pushing out into all that is. Maybe it just means you feel your breath moving in and out, bringing you into being here and now. Spirit of life and love, Holy One of our being and our becoming, that which is sacred within, among, and beyond us. May we find both love and liberation today. May we know and give the kind of love that begets freedom, that allows our beloveds to both be and grow. May we give this kind of love and may we receive it. May we be this kind of love. May we be the kind of love that liberates, that frees ourselves and others to be full and growing and flourishing human beings, unimpeded by domination or injustice. May we have and know and be liberating love. Amen.
Morning, everyone. My name is Eric Alexander. I'm pleased to be your worship associate this morning. Welcome to the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee. We welcome people of all genders, sexualities, ages, races, ethnicities, histories, and bodies. We welcome your mind, your heart, and your spirit. We welcome all you are carrying with you today and all your heart longs to set down. We welcome all the people watching online this morning as we live stream this service. Hello, online folks. We especially welcome guests joining us today. If you are a visiting guest, we invite you to fill out a welcome card located in the pew rack in front of you and drop it in the offering plate that will come around in a few minutes. Please join us for a social hour after the service across the hall in the Lean House Common Room. Some accessibility notes: you can find hearing assist devices and large print hymnals and orders of service at the back of the sanctuary, as well as worship activity bags for children and anyone else who wants them. There is a fragrance-free area in the front right pews. If you're watching online, you can enable YouTube's closed captioning on your viewing device. We have a couple of announcements this morning. There is nothing like getting a real letter. We are thrilled to open up signups today for Mystery Friends, closing signups on February 4th. Once you're signed up, RE staff will pair you with a friend, and you will exchange short letters each week for a month. On Sunday, March 17th, we celebrate with a party, allowing friends to meet face-to-face. To sign up, you can find information at the RE table. Also, Ray Zimmerly, our current artist in the common room, will be present for coffee hour and will give a talk at 12:30 by her art. I welcome you to share in our First Church worship and purpose by inviting you to join me in a unison affirmation of our mission. We gather to nurture the spirit, engage the mind, and inspire action. Every week we have an opportunity to practice our values through sharing our resources. Our pledges are at the core of our spiritual practice of generosity. In addition, the church shares half of all the non-pledged cash in our offering plate with a community organization, practicing our value of interdependence. Today we share the plate with the Community Center for Immigrants. CCI promotes integration into American society by providing educational, legal, and social services to Milwaukee's immigrant and refugee community. May the practice of giving bring us joy. The offering will now be gratefully received as we sing the civil rights freedom song, "Oh, I Woke Up This Morning," which you'll find in your order of service. I invite all children, youth, and RE volunteers to sing the first verse of the hymn, and then follow Reverend Kimberly to the Lean House Common Room and then downstairs for religious education. If your child needs to check in for RE, please accompany them to the common room now. I invite you now to join us in singing, "Oh, I Woke Up This Morning." In retrospect, it all goes back to Zuzu, the intervention decision dog. Now that's a strange sentence, so let me unpack it. It was 2012, and I was struggling to choose between which of two dermatology practices I wanted to join after my training. My wife Ann had grown exhausted, hearing me waffle on the matter for months, and in seeing how it was weighing me down. Arriving home from work one evening, Ann handed me our Shipu Zuzu, whom she had adored, with a Superman-esque crest that read Intervention Decision Dog. She told me I had to make a decision that night. Zuzu's involvement didn't make any sense, other than everything in life is made better by dogs. A few hours later, I signed a contract. The decision was multifactorial, but one issue nagged at me. One practice, the one I did not join, kept giving me confusing and contradictory answers on their Medicaid policy. I made sure to ask every practice I considered if they accepted patients with Medicaid, the federally funded, state-run health insurance program for people with limited resources. My view was that I didn't become a doctor to alleviate human suffering for only those people with means, so I wouldn't join a practice that excluded these patients. I wanted to be a positive force in my new community, not just part of the community. Even knowing nothing about UUism at the time, I wanted to stand for human worth and dignity by caring for all in need. The practice initially said they didn't accept Medicaid, but then changed that answer upon seeing my discomfort to say they saw few Medicaid patients because they, quote, weren't on the bus line. Even ignoring the anti-transit sentiment, this did not feel like a place where I could be the kind of person I strive to be. My young idealistic self didn't realize how this topic would ultimately affect me personally. Why would a physician even want to exclude people with Medicaid from their practice? I've heard many excuses. Some say these patients are less punctual and more likely to skip appointments. I'd say the option to be on time is a privilege, involving things like owning a car and having reliable child care. Some say these patients are more medically complex. I say you're a doctor, for crying out loud. You're afraid of medical complexity and helping those most in need? Besides, medical complexity can make it hard to hold steady employment. Ultimately, though, it's about money. Some say they can get reimbursed up to 10 times less for the same service through Medicaid than through private insurance. I'd say that's true. In a more just society, this wouldn't be a choice physicians have to, or perhaps are even permitted to make. I'd like to tell you that I can always keep these thoughts front and center, and I have the patience of a saint. That's not true. I do get frustrated by a late patient, a no-show, or a system of such inequitable resource management. But I try to remind myself that it is an action, not a person, that is annoying me. And this action is likely the manifestation of a person who is suffering, a person who is in pain, a person whose anguish is compounded by the daily need to navigate through injustice. What that young idealistic me didn't realize is that seeing patients regardless of their insurance status is not just an act of service and community, it's an act of personal liberation. This epiphany came as a young doctor, not long out of training, when another similarly young doctor canceled a patient's upcoming appointment and scheduled her with me because the patient had Medicaid. To pore over your future schedule in detail to discriminate seemed exhausting in its cruelty. You see, if I bought into the excuses to restrict my patient population, I'd have to tell myself a lie. A series of them, actually. It's not about money. I'm too fragile and inept to adapt to some scheduling hiccups. It's okay to avoid complex patients because something. Choosing love allows me to break free from that oppressive box of lies. It allows me to be my authentic self. I get to be the kind of doctor I always wanted to be by living my personal values at work every day. In a larger sense, I've realized that burying aspects of who I am in any part of my life will only lead to inner tumult and anguish. It can be a challenge, but I found liberation in embracing who I truly am and not trying to fit into a preconceived narrative. Zuzu did her job that night. She was a very, very good girl.
listen, my sisters and brothers, 'cause if you do, you can hear there are voices still calling from across the years. And they're all crying across the ocean. They're all crying across the land. And they will till we all come together to understand. None of us are free. None of us are free. None of us are free. If one of us is chained, none of us are free. And there are people still in darkness, and they just can't see the light. If you don't say it's wrong, then that says it's right. We gotta try to feel for each other. Let our brothers know that we care. Gotta get the message, send it out loud and clear. None of us are free. None of us are free. None of us are free. One of us are chained. None of us are free. Now I swear your salvation isn't too hard to find. None of us can find it on our own. We've got to join together in spirit, heart, and mind, so that every soul who's suffering will know that they're not alone. Yeah. Whoa. None of us are free. None of us are free. None of us are free. If one of us are chained, none of us are free. Look around you, you're gonna see what I say. 'Cause the world is getting smaller each passing day. Now it's time to start making changes, and it's time for us all to realize that the truth is shining bright right before your eyes. None of us are free. None of us are free. None of us are free. As long as what's is changed, none of us are free. Oh, oh, none of us are free. None of us are free. None of us are free. As one of us are changed, none of us are free. None of us, none of us, none of us, none of us. Oh, none of us are free. None of us are free. As long as us is changed, none of us are free. My, 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 my. Oh, none of us, none of us. Oh, none of us are free. As long as us is changed, none of us are free. 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 One of us is chained. None of us are free. Oh, 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 oh. None of us are free. None of us are free. None of us are free. And one of us are chained. None of us are free.
Can I get an amen? Good morning, First Church. I am Deborah Klepp, and I'd like to share with you a few excerpts from a lecture given by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., delivered to the Unitarian Universalist General Assembly on May 16th, 1966, in Hollywood, Florida. Quote, Certainly, the church has a great responsibility because when the church is true to its nature, it stands as a moral guardian of the community and of society. It has always been the role of the church to broaden horizons, to challenge the status quo, and to question and break mores if necessary. I'm sure that we all agree that the church has a major role in this period of social change. I would like to suggest some of the things that the church must continually do in order to remain awake through the revolution. First, we are challenged to instill within the people of our congregations a world perspective. The world in which we live is geographically one. Now, more and more, we are challenged to make it one in terms of brotherhood. We must live together as brothers, or we will all perish together as fools. This is a fact of life. No individual can live alone. No nation can live alone. Some years ago, Mrs. King and I journeyed to that great country known as India. I never will forget the experience. It was a marvelous experience to meet and talk with the great leaders of India and to meet and talk with thousands and thousands of people all over cities and villages of that vast country. These experiences remain dear to me, and it disturbed me. But my friends, I must say to you tonight that there were very depressing moments. How can I avoid being depressed when one sees with his own eyes evidence of millions of people going to bed hungry? How can one avoid being depressed when he sees thousands sleeping on the sidewalks at night? More than 1 million people sleep on the sidewalks of Calcutta and Bombay every night. More than 600,000 sleep on the sidewalks of Calcutta alone. They have no houses to go in. They have no beds to sleep in. How can one avoid being depressed when he discovers that out of India's population of 400 million people, some 380 million earn less than $90 a year? Most of these people have never seen a doctor. Many, if not most, have seen a dentist. As I noticed these conditions, something within me cried out, can we in the United States stand idly by and not be concerned? And an answer came, oh no. Because our destiny is tied up with the destiny of India and of every other nation. I started thinking about the millions of dollars that we spend each day to store surplus food. And I said to myself, I know where we can store that food, free of charge, in the wrinkled stomachs of millions of God's children in Asia, in Africa, in South America, in our own nation who go to bed hungry. It may be that we spend too much of our national budget establishing military bases around the world and too little on the basis of genuine concern and understanding. All I'm saying is this, that all life is interrelated, and somehow we are all tied together. For some strange reason, I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And you can never be what you ought to be until I can be what I ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of all reality. John Donne caught it years ago and placed it in graphic terms. No man is an entire island of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. He goes on to say, any man's death diminishes me because I am involved in mankind. Therefore, send not to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. This realization is absolutely necessary if we are to remain awake in this revolution. End quote. May it be so.
In his 1967 book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. wrote, "Power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic." Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice. Justice at its best is love correcting everything that stands against love. This month in church, we're considering how liberating love centers our Unitarian Universalist faith. Liberating love removes everything that occludes love. Love that sets us free removes the constraints of pain and oppression and abuse and lies and sometimes literal bars. It removes everything that separates us from love. But what is that pesky thing I keep calling love? The theologian Paul Tillich defined power as the drive of everything living to realize itself, and love as the drive towards the unity of that which is separated. In Bell Hook's book, All About Love, she uses N. Scott Peck's definition of love, which is the will to extend oneself for the purposes of nurturing oneself or another's spiritual growth. Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams, a Zen priest and the second Black woman recognized as a teacher in the Japanese Zen lineage, defined love as space. Williams said, "It is in developing our own capacity for spaciousness within ourselves that allows others to be as they are. And that is love." The humanist philosopher Erich Fromm posited that love is not primarily a relationship to a specific person. Love is rather an attitude, an orientation of character which determines a person's relatedness to the world as a whole. What is love? So in every new member class here at First Church, the very first thing that we do is engage in a theological exercise to explore love. At church, one of our calls is to make meaning together. And in fact, we did this exercise just on Wednesday with the winter new member class. So if there are folks in that class here today, just be patient while I catch the rest of the congregation up. So in church, we develop theology together. And that's, I know, a big word. It just means the study of God, I know, which is also a big word. But when I use that word, God, what I mean is the most powerful force in the universe. So you get to define that for yourself. What do you think the most powerful force in the universe is? Some people might say that it's change. Author and philosopher Octavia Butler wrote an entire series of books about how God is change. Other people say that the most powerful force in the universe is love. In Unitarian Universalism, I've heard both of these pretty commonly, but I think the most common word I have heard used interchangeably with God is the word love. And whether or not you believe that love is the most powerful force in the universe, it is what we understand as you use as the center of our faith and our practice in the world. It is the animating force for our tradition and what we try to do. So I want to invite you into a little Unitarian Universalist theological exercise. I want you to take a moment and think of a time when you felt truly and deeply loved. And if you can't remember a time right now, imagine feeling truly and deeply loved. When you remember or imagine, where was that feeling coming from? And what did it feel like? Did you feel it in your body? Was there a spot? What was the sensation? And as you remember that, what did that feeling cause you to do? Now, I want you to complete this sentence for me. You can do it internally, very valid. Also, I invite you to shout out. This is your moment to shout in church. Complete this sentence. Love is always. Love is always. Kind, free, connecting, safe, powerful. There are a lot of different answers, but that is what making theology is. We move from thinking to feeling to action to extrapolation. What is the meaning of this thing? One of the ways that human beings can sometimes dodge, avoid the power and transformation of love's call. One of the ways that we can avoid the movement of the holy in our lives is by requiring someone else to define it and then critiquing that definition. And instead of doing that, I want to invite us in to creating together, to using our experience and our wisdom to create our definition of what is holy and what matters and what is love. Instead of using our minds to distance it from it, let ourselves feel it and be moved by it to action. What would it be like if we truly allowed love, our experience of love, to guide what we do every day in the world? In 2021, the King Center, which was established in 1968 by Mrs. Coretta Scott King as a memorial as well as an educational and social change institution, in 2021, the King Center launched a campaign called Be Love. This campaign from the King Center called people to pledge to be love and allow love to drive your thoughts and words and decisions and actions and honor the humanity of every human being. It asks people to pledge to speak the truth to power in love, to focus on defeating injustice, and to demonstrate a life of courage, care, and compassion as you boldly confront anything that stands in opposition to love. If you took that pledge, if you took the King Center's pledge to be love, what would that be like in your life? Every day, how would you live that pledge? What would you do? In the last several years of his life and his ministry, Dr. King's relationship with love kept calling him further into ever widening and more systemic change-making in the world. King began his ministry fighting for civil rights for Black people in the American South. His love called him to organize to overcome injustice, standing in the way of love. It drove him to tirelessly work for that justice, to put his body on the line and his family in harm's way, to face fear and violence and jail and death. And then that specific, that particular love, that beautiful burning love, clearing away the injustice that occluded it, it tunneled down in through the ground of being, and it came up into universal love. The reading that Deborah shared at the beginning of this sermon was from May of 1966. In April of 1967, Dr. King gave his famous Beyond Vietnam speech at Riverside Church.
From Beyond Vietnam. This call for a worldwide fellowship that lifts neighborly concern beyond one's tribe, race, class, nation is in reality a call for an all-embracing and unconditional love for all mankind. This oft misunderstood, this oft misinterpreted concept, so readily dismissed by Nietzsche's of the world as a weak and cowardly force, has now become an absolute necessity for the survival of man. When I speak of love, I am not speaking of some sentimental and weak response. I am not speaking of that force which is just emotional bosh. I am speaking of that force which all of the great religions have seen as the supreme unifying principle of life. Love is somehow the key that unlocks the door which leads us to the ultimate reality. This Hindu, Muslim, Christian, Jewish, Buddhist belief about ultimate reality is beautifully summed up in the first epistle of St. John. Let us love one another, for love is God. And everyone that loves is born of God and knows God. If we love one another, God dwells in us, and God's love is perfected in us. Let us hope the Spirit will become the order of the day.
Dr. King's understanding of love as the ultimate reality His understanding that all children are our children, that we are bound up in one another in an inextricable garment of destiny, that was not new. Dr. King had made previous pronouncements against the Vietnam War, and his trip to India, where he experienced that horrific poverty and hunger of children in Calcutta that was described in our first reading, that trip was in 1959. Dr. King's moral system of love plus power, it went back to his days in seminary, when, according to King, quote, "As I delved deeper into the philosophy of Gandhi, my skepticism concerning the power of love gradually diminished, and I came to see for the first time that the Christian doctrine of love, operating through the Gandhian method of nonviolence, was one of the most potent weapons available to oppressed people in their struggle for freedom." He said that the 1955 Montgomery bus boycott was his first attempt to put these ideas into action to remove the injustice that was occluding love for Black people in the American South. In the last several years of his life, though, love was calling Dr. King to put these same ideas into more broad action. He and the Southern Christian Leadership Council began planning the Poor People's Campaign to fight what he called the triple evils of poverty, war, and racism. That Poor People's Campaign was radical. It called for the redistribution of resources away from the American military and into the economy for poor and working people in the United States. The Poor People's Campaign would have connected the power of the civil rights movement with the power of the unions. According to the California Labor Federation, the campaign was, quote, demanding $30 billion in 1968 annually to fight poverty. It was demanding full employment and living wage public jobs for all those who were unemployed. It was demanding a guaranteed minimum income for those who were excluded from the labor market because of their age or their caregiving responsibilities or automation. And it was demanding an increase in minimum wage to a living wage for all workers without exemptions, and access to land and credit for the rural poor. It was calling for the construction of affordable housing units and the immediate withdrawal of American troops from Vietnam. It was calling to redirect military spending to domestic reconstruction. The Poor People's Campaign was seizing the power gained with the right to vote and putting it into changing the material conditions of Black people and poor people and white people, and fundamentally changing the material conditions of the United States of America. Dr. King traveled to Memphis in March of 1968 to launch the Poor People's Campaign. He was there to support African American sanitation workers on strike for a living wage and the right to form a union. He was there to launch a campaign that would upend the financial and military structures of the United States of America. He was assassinated on April 4th of 1968. Dr. King's relationship with love moved through his body and into action, where he gave his life to transform unjust systems that repeatedly got in the way of love for Black people and for all people. These unjust systems that we're living in harm everyone. and upending them, transforming them so that the systems are based on love instead of domination, liberates us all. This is what the call of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day is about. It's not a memorial to a single man's life, nor is it a tribute to a struggle from another time. It is a day of practice, a day of calling us into living into Dr. King's legacy, into living into the call that he made real in his own life, the call of love to remove everything that gets in the way of love. But it's not just about removing violence and threat. It's also the call of everyone getting to have a thick red stew for a very good dinner. It's the call of everyone having access to health care and medicine and housing and education, but more than just the material conditions, it's the call of love to hope and creativity and imagination and human connection and love in the biggest sense of the word. Love that is about putting ourselves forward and making room for one another's spiritual growth. That call was radical. It was society upending. It was dangerous. And it still lives. That call to be love in our lives and in our institutions, it is still here. It is inviting us to be love, to upend the institutions of discrimination and racism and capitalism and patriarchy. Bell Hooks wrote, "The moment we choose to love, we begin to move against domination. The moment we choose to love, we begin to move towards freedom, to act in ways that liberate ourselves and others. That action is the testimony of love as the practice of freedom. For we free ourselves too when we choose to love. We free ourselves from the box of lies that Eric talked about. We free ourselves from the illusion of separation, and we free ourselves from the constraints of systems of domination. We live liberation when we live love, because we start dusting away the cobwebs of every dirty system that occludes it. This world-changing love, it always starts small. It always starts local. It always starts specific in relationship with the people in front of you. Tomorrow, on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, the anti-racism team is heading over to the table for a Dr. King celebration, and we hope that you'll join us. We'll be serving lunch to the guests. That means assisting in the kitchen, setting up, serving it, cleaning up, washing dishes. It's local, it's specific, it's relational, and it's what we've been asked to do by our friends here in Milwaukee. Deborah has some flyers if you want to learn more. It's also printed in your orders of service if you'd like to join us. And in March, our team is leading an anti-racism training here at church, focusing on how we can change church systems. Love is big. Love is huge, sometimes overwhelming. It's powerful and universal, but it's also small. It's local, it's concrete, it's particular. As Reverend Dina said last week, we begin to love the whole world by loving the person right in front of us, building relationships that build power to change systems. from being run on domination to being run on the power of love. Love and freedom are interwoven with one another. Amen. Dear ones, may we not rest. May we instead take the actions of true love which lead to freedom for all people. May it be so, and amen. Will you please rise in body or spirit for our recessional hymn, number 131, Love Will Guide Us.